Let's begin with one famous event from the supposed life of Jesus, his baptism by John the Baptist. Now, believe it or not, many people who argue for a historical Jesus tell the world that the bedrock of an historical Jesus rests on two things that are beyond doubt, and you would have to be something of a nutter to doubt them. The first of these is his crucifixion. How can we doubt that? We have Christianity. Something must have happened, and the answer is the crucifixion happened. That's the proof of that. The other supposed certainty on which the historical Jesus rests is the baptism. So here is an illustration of Jesus being baptized by John the Baptist in, as we know, the Jordan. Now, the synoptic Gospels, that's Matthew, Mark and Luke, give very little information as to where this actually was. We simply know that Jesus went to the wilderness and was baptized by John in the Jordan. Here's what we're talking about. And if you go to Israel anytime soon, you can go to a place called Yardenit on the Jordan, where you can purchase a very lovely white smock and be baptized in the Jordan like Jesus. It's a delightful little venue and has everything that you could wish for and expect in a baptism site used by Jesus himself. And if I tell you something like 500,000 tourists and pilgrims visit this place every year, well, you can see that it just oozes sanctity. The only problem with Yardenit is that it was established, well, not so many years ago, like 1981. Before that, it didn't exist. This is not an historical venue. What is it then? Well, what happened is that in the years 1967, there was a war, and the area of the Jordan traditionally associated with Jesus was filled up with mines. It became a very hostile frontier place off the tourist map. Now, that area was shut off to tourists until only a few years ago. So the Israeli government and the Israeli Ministry of Tourism thought that we're losing lots of very valuable dollars, and so they created a baptism site to meet the needs of primarily American Christians who wanted to touch the authentic venue of these Jesus events. Now, let's tell you a little bit more about Yardenit. Where is it? If you know your geography, that little lake at the top there is known as the Sea of Galilee. And down the bottom there, that longer stretch of water is the Dead Sea. Now, Yardenit is just outside the outflow from the Sea of Galilee, up in the top corner. So that's where they built this Ersatz baptism site to please the tourists and continue to earn revenue. The traditional site was where the Jordan entered the Dead Sea. So having put into your mind the fact that because of politics, because of economic and political factors, the government of the day established a fake site for baptism in the north, let's go and have a look at the site that was established long ago in the south. This is the traditional site for Jesus' baptism. How do we know that? Well, only one of the Gospels refers to where Jesus was baptized, and that, surprisingly, is the last one. The other Gospels don't give any clear idea, but the last of them is very good at it. It has two places. The place that Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist was Bethany, across the Jordan, in other words, on the eastern bank of the Jordan. That's where the original site for the baptism were marked out. And that's what the Jordan looks like now, nearer to its authentic baptism site. Clearly, it's not a very appetizing place. This is the earlier site where pilgrims went to have their union with Jesus. If in the 20th century we can have a fake Jesus theme park created, is it at all possible that back in the days of the Byzantine Empire they might have done the self-same thing? Well, I'm going to give you the answer. If we look down south at a place called the Bridge of King Abdullah, this is the original marking stone for that authentic traditional site of the baptism of Jesus. So this is even further south than the one we just saw. So you can see we're getting a proliferation of the authentic sites of Jesus, because clearly the clue here is if you have an authentic holy site, you're on to a winner. Pilgrims need services. You make money. As fortune would have it, we have evidence from what the Byzantines got up to. Not far from the River Jordan, in the country of Jordan, there is something known as the Mosaic of Madaba. It's in a church, the floor of this church, about the size of a large room. It is covered with a mosaic of the Eastern Mediterranean world, and a very lovely piece. It dates from the 6th century. And what it shows is what the Byzantines in the 6th century thought was the authentic baptism site of Jesus. Now we have written testimony actually earlier still, from the 2nd century. We have a churchman called Origen who said that he couldn't find Bethany across the Jordan, to which Gospel of John referred. He couldn't find it, and he was looking. He came up with an alternative name, and you can see it within that red circle there in the pale colour. Bethabara. This is the alternative offering for Bethany. And it's recorded on this map. And it says Bethabara, the site where Jesus was baptised by John. Across the top there you'll see some more letters, because the second place that John offers for the baptism of Jesus was called Enon near Salim. Now the best that they could get to that place is a place called Enon, because the word Enon just means spring, and the name there is totally different. And this is where they placed the second Eon. But notice what's happening here. John gives a certain testimony, but what shows up on the map? You'll notice that Bethabara is not beyond the Jordan, it's actually on the other bank. So it's not only a different name, it's in a different place. And they've stuck something else on the other side of the river. On the same map, further up the river, and hedging their bets, they place yet another Enon. And the saying recorded there, this is also where John baptized. So I hope you get the message here. What they are doing is dotting places where they can. Now, is their choice random? Is it based on anything authentic? Well, if we remember that earlier one, what is the case here? On the northern shore, something special happened there, according to Jewish scripture. What happened? Elijah ascended to heaven. Now, who is the new Elijah? Why, it's John the Baptist. So they had a holy site, and of course it's the obvious place to put the new holy site, the new one on top of the old one. And that is a clue to what they have done throughout the Holy Land. If they don't know anywhere, and there are surely many places that have no actual existence, they go to somewhere else. And the thing about Bethabara, believe it or not, this is where the Israelites entered the promised land. So how auspicious. The very spot where the Israelites tramped across the River Jordan is where Jesus goes to be baptized. Because, of course, Jesus replaces everything about what went before. If you want to understand how they wrote their Gospels, they were determined to have a replacement for everything that went before. So none of the places chosen are random, they have a very specific reason. Let's finish this off, this little bit about baptism. I like this particular story. John the Baptist poor old guy, he gets his head cut off, doesn't he? We all know the story about the dance of Salome, a drunken king. He's having a birthday party with his pals, and he says to her, in order to get her to dance in a risque fashion, anything you want up to half my kingdom. And what does she do? Because her dastardly mother puts her up to it. I want the head of John the Baptist, right? We all know that lovely story. It produces some beautiful art. As it happens, we have some information about John the Baptist from the Jewish historian Josephus, the first century historian, which we use a lot today, and certainly the Christians used a lot when they were writing their Gospels. And Josephus says, John was a good man. He was arrested by Herod Antipas because he thought John would start a rebellion, and he put him in prison. And this is the prison. It was a castle on a place called Mangerus. This is a castle right down to the south towards the border with the Nabateans. And this is where John eventually had his head cut off. Let's go back and look at the map. Herod's palace was in Tiberias, his capital city. It was a Romanized city on the banks of the Sea of Galilee. This is where he would have called his nobles for his birthday party. And if you remember the story, he sends out for the head of John the Baptist. Now, I put it to you, could you, between the main course and your dessert, get somebody to go down 80 miles to this fortress in the south, arrange to cut off somebody's head and bring it back to the banquet to present to the king? I think by then your dinner would have got cold. So that scene with Herod being presented with a head is just not possible, unless they waited and waited and waited for about 5 days. Okay, so you can see how the story is ridiculous, but also that the geography doesn't support it.